So you just put your attention on a thing, one thing. And, I sit at a chair in front of sliding glass doors and I look out and I find something. Sometimes it's the clouds, sometimes it's the sun, sometimes it's a tree or a bird. And I just put all of my attention on that. And all the other thoughts disappear. And then there's a space, there's a gap in there. And that's what you're really looking for, is the gap between thoughts. So I may be having a thought about the bird, like, oh, isn't that beautiful? And just be in the moment with the feeling the beauty. So you're out of your thinking mind into the feelings and you're like, oh, that's so beautiful. And you're just feeling the beauty of it. And then there's a gap that opens up. And inside the gap is no thought. And that's where God enters.
Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art. Good day, listeners. This is the Spiritual Artist Podcast. It's been an exciting week, and I have two really great guests on the show today. And I'm so excited for this because right now, I think more than ever, we need to learn how to listen to that inner voice, that guidance within ourselves. And I have brought back Joe Kresoja and Tonya Henderson, both recent people that I've interviewed. And what's so great about these two people is that they're both artists as well as intuitives. And I love that. I think that is so amazing that we're creating this community of people that do love the creative act as well as being mindfully, consciously present. So I want to introduce and reintroduce Joe. Good morning, Joe. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great.
Glad to have you back. And Tonya, how are you this morning?
Excellent. Glad to be here.
Okay, so Joe, could you remind the listeners a little bit about where you're located and just a couple sentences about what you do?
My name is Joe Kresoja. I'm in Los Angeles, California. I'm an artist, and I also do something I call spiritual color codes, which is I talk to somebody, tap into their energy, and I basically translate the colors and shapes that I see from them. And then while I'm painting it, I get flooded with intuitive insights for the person, about the person, and new perspectives for them to take.
That's amazing. So, Tonya, tell people where you are too, as well, because I think this is neat that we're stretching the whole country here. But and what you do.
Yeah, I'm up in the mid-Michigan area. That's usually referred to as the middle of the Lower Peninsula. And I'm an artist. I'm a art instructor and business coach for artists, but mainly I do personal energy portraits, which is basically a psychic reading where I'm painting the visions that I see for people.
Mm. You can see, listeners, why I'm so excited about having these two people on, and we're going to talk about what I want to talk about and what I want to share. And I'm just going to start this. And Joe and both Joe and Tonya were so open to doing this, which I love. A couple things I realized. First, when I started doing my work, my book, The Spiritual Artist, I thought that all artists were spiritual. And interesting, right? And I have since learned that that's not really the case, and that some people are more conscious creators than others. And it's not that we're not all creators, but some people are just more self-aware of what they're doing. And I have to tell you, after talking with Joe and Tonya, I just incredible heart space in me that both of these people are just so full of conscious awareness. So, and then I want to tell you another side, listeners, is I've also talked to many different, what you would call traditional terms, psychics. I talked to a guy recently that is a tarot card reader. But what's interesting is I also realized that there are people that can read or have a connection that is really well defined to this greater mind or the subconscious, but they're not necessarily spiritually evolved either, which is really interesting, right?
Mhm.
I think that these two guests are really spiritually evolved as well as conscious, as well as artists. So, what I want to open up here, and I hope you guys are willing to do this, is I want to help our listeners tap into their own voice. And so I thought, let's explore, how do you do it? Joe, how do you do these? Can you talk about the physical, mental process you go through when you do this?
Oh, that's an interesting question because sometimes I don't even know. So, because each time it's a little different, but it's basically, well, when it started happening for me, I would see colors and shapes when I talked to people. And some people said, oh, this is an aura. And then I talked to a leading aura reader guy, and he's like, no, you're reading something else. And I just called it the essence of the person at the time. So when I started doing this, it was more about tuning into what I'm feeling and not labeling the feelings or trying to mentally figure it out. Because I noticed myself and a lot of other people always try to figure it out when they say, how do I wrap my mind around this? To me, that's all like, that's just getting in the way. At least for me, how do you wrap your mind? How do I wrap my mind around this? Does it need to be wrapped around it? No. That's my take on it. Because when you try to wrap your mind around it, you're trying to put a box. So I try to put no box on it, and I don't try to go at it the same way every time. So what it is I just tune in and then I start drawing shapes. And then pretty soon, once I'm connected with the person, I can feel it. Then different shapes and colors start to emerge. Really am aware of when my thinking mind pops in, because the thinking mind will be like, oh, that color looks wrong here. All this stuff that I learned from art school and teachers. Oh, that's composition's crap or whatever, you know. And it's like, no, that's not what's coming through. That's the overlay of me.
Mm.
So I keep pushing that away, and pretty soon that's just gone, and I'm just flowing with it. And then while I'm flowing with it, certain subject matters will come up to me, mention this about the person. And sometimes it's things I don't want. I'm like, that's not it. I don't need to mention that about the person. But if it keeps coming at me, then it's like, okay, that's the theme. And so to me, it's just really tapping in and feeling without thinking, and seeing what comes through and just getting out of the way. Because when I'm really in the flow, it's like I'm watching myself paint this. It's like I'm watching myself watch myself do this work instead of like consciously doing the work. Even though I'm watching myself do it. It's a weird state that's actually very peaceful and beautiful. Sometimes there's some, you pick up, at least I pick up on some things that are very pleasant about the person, and well, that sounds kind of bad. Not in a negative way, just things that they need to work through. And some of the colors and shapes aren't what I particularly like, but I put them down anyways. So for me, it's just big thing is feeling without labeling and thinking about it. That's the best way I tap into what I'm doing. And in all aspects of life is just if I really
Wow.
tap in and feel it.
Tonya, is that how do you relate to that? Does that ring true? Or are you different, or?
No, it's pretty close to exactly the same experience. It's um, there's a there's a sort of a little ritual I go through just to begin a session by being present and being mindful of what's about to happen, um, and opening the space. So when he's talking about making sure, it's not your own ego, your own subconscious coming in, um, it's you're connecting to higher mind, you're connecting to divine intelligence. And so I make a space before I start to make that connection. And for me, it's sort of like a meditation. So, like any meditation, I'm closing my eyes, I'm bringing myself to the present moment, I'm making that connection to higher mind, but I'm also making a connection to the person I'm working with. So it's a two-way thing, from me to them, but from me to the higher self too. And sometimes I try to make that easier for people to comprehend. I'm like, it's just my higher self talking to your higher self, and we're, they're having a conversation and they're feeding me information. So, but all the rest of it is pretty much the same. It's like you step into the creative flow. You're opening that channel of communication. So then you're seeing, hearing, sensing, feeling things that you're trying to translate onto the canvas. So that if nothing else, even if it's just shape and color, you can communicate, what you were receiving during the time that you were painting that shape and that color. Because shape and color all have meanings, symbolic meanings, just like, more concrete symbols. So he's right on. He's very close to doing exactly the same thing that I'm doing.
Do you know, I find amazing when I talk to both of you, and Tonya, you just did it. Is sometimes I feel that you guys, I don't know if it's because you're intuitive or we're just so aligned, but you actually pick up languaging that I use. I mean, I'm like, Tonya, you just said I step into, and I'm like, well, I just did a whole sermon on stepping into, and how does she do that? Like, how does she pick that word up?
It's just, no, this is all what we're all doing. We're all doing kind of the same thing. And so the languaging is the same. And I think that probably the only difference between any of us is probably this idea of our language being different. Like the people that I try to teach to do this, that's one of the main things that I'm telling them. It's not about you adapting my language. It's about you developing your own. So, for me, if I see cockroaches, I know that the person is on drugs. So,
Oh,
right? So that's my language. You could have a completely different interpretation of a cockroach. It might mean entirely something different to you. And so you're working with your background and what you know and translating through your own filters. And we're, on some level, we're all kind of picking up on the same wave. We're all doing kind of the same thing. So,
so I love this idea that you have a language that what I just heard is that you actually see certain imagery that represents something to you.
yes.
Joe, does it work that way for you?
Uh, in a way, but I don't see stuff like cockroaches and stuff because I think what it is for me, since I came from I used to draw and paint a lot of figures and landscapes, and I worked in the video game industry for 25 years doing all sorts of things. That when these color codes started happening for me, what came through was I'm not, well, now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of like what was enticing. I'm gonna get to a point somewhere in here. I
That's all right. We're just sitting here
it's
in
it's
non-judgment. You know.
it's I what was intriguing to me about these color codes is there was no symbology as far as stuff like that. But having said that, when she talked about that, something similar but not is I will see certain color patterns and angles. I notice if somebody's on drugs or something, I see a lot of angles, almost like box shaped. Having said that, I also see box shapes if someone has very mentally strong limiting beliefs. They're almost
Wow.
the same as drugs in a sense, it's just a different color. So in that sense, because I purposely will not put any symbols in my color codes that represent something for the person, like a feather or anything like that, just because I don't want any of that mental stuff for them to trigger, like, oh, hey, this means this means that. Because if somebody asked me to like, oh, I love white feathers, I want a white feather in there, that's a no for me. I just have to have what comes through, and usually I purposely try to make it abstract and just shapes and colors. But seeing a cockroach is cool, so I would be down to seeing that.
Yeah, I that's where we do different because I see a lot of things visually in my mind. And sometimes it can be like a little movie clip, and sometimes it's just the image, and sometimes it's the energy in motion um and the fluidity, like what I'm assuming you're talking about. But um I don't bring a symbol in, like I wouldn't necessarily paint a cockroach.
Mhm.
And truthfully, I haven't seen anything like that probably, I don't know, 10 years. But that was just an analogy. But I do paint the symbol because I won't receive anything else until I do. So I have to paint that symbol. And it won't be like realism or anything like that, but it's enough to be able to tell that when I say this is that, you'll see it. And one of the things I found that is by putting the symbols into the artwork and then explaining the story as it's unfolding, the person has a connection to it. They can say, like for instance, I did this one, and the only thing I can remember about it is had a little tiny little turtle, like a sea turtle, down in the corner. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know why this is here. I didn't get any meanings or anything about this. I can tell you a little bit about the symbolism of the turtle, but I don't know why it's here. And she said to me back, well, I'll tell you why it's there. I collect sea turtles, little figurines and whatnot, and I needed a confirmation that what you were telling me was true.
That-
so
That's
it's
beautiful.
interesting that, some of those symbols have a deeper meaning to the person who's receiving it. So I'll give them, the information that I'm receiving, but then they can take that reading to a deeper level once they get it home and start looking at it and seeing, like, this means this to me and that. Um so that's how mine come out. There's a
Well,
lot of symbols.
well, you were saying something earlier that we all have our own language.
Yes.
And so I think it's interesting because I probably lean towards your way, Joe, in the sense that I feel shape and color, um, and it does. And I find occasionally that a symbol will pop up, something like a bird or a heart or more simple, but some shapes do come up. But do you think that's just because we're all different, right? We're all going to receive this
Yeah.
information differently, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, and somewhat the same, because I see shapes and color and sacred geometry and the movement of energy and all of that too. It's just that sometimes those symbols, what I've found is that they really mean something to that person. And um, I'm not creating any of those pieces for like a masterpiece that'll hang in a museum. That's not why I'm creating them. I'm creating them so that this person knows that there's more to them than what they previously thought, and that they're not hiding the things that they think that they're hiding, because that's one thing. It's like most people walk around hiding most of who they are. And by sharing these things with them, they can tell that you are actually seeing them. And like, you, to your point, Joe, is like, these are the things that they need to work on. This is the thing that you can't hide behind anymore, and you make them aware of something that's going on in their life, and then they can fix it, they can change it. I always said that, I'm like, the best friend that you could possibly have is someone who is brave enough to tell you the truth, because we can't see things for ourselves a lot of times. We could think, oh, I'm trying so hard, I'm working on all this stuff, and then there's still this block and I don't understand it. And if your best friend would say, look, this is your problem, and you wouldn't take it offense to somebody saying that to you, like, I mean, sometimes it can feel hurtful, or like, oh my God, I've just been called out or whatever, but you're not going to grow past it until somebody points it out to you.
One of the differences, Tanya, is people come to you and they're saying, here, I'm willingly coming to this place for you to help me. In real life, you'll have sometimes friends share stuff with you and they want to vent, but sometimes they don't want to hear me. I did it the other day. I actually said to a friend of mine, I said, you know what? I'm gonna challenge you on this gently. As I said, "Look, is it okay if I challenge you on this gently?" So I do think it's an advantage when people are coming to you ready to move ahead, right?
Yeah, and I feel like if they're sitting down with me for a portrait, that's what they're wanting.
Right.
They're wanting to move forward in some way.
Now I
And,
want
and
to.
truthfully, there's so much information out there that you could share with somebody about themselves. And I always start with this idea of like, just give me what's the most important thing for them to hear today. Because I may or may not have another opportunity to work with this person. And I don't need to know all of their stuff, you know, just the one thing that they're open to hearing in the moment and in a way that could change their life. I mean, that's the real goal, right? Is to bring someone closer to being more aware of themselves.
Mm. That's very important for me, and so I'm going to take that, be aware of it, and we're going to Joe. Early on, I think you might have said this even before we started the recording, that you are working on one of these paintings right now for yourself, and I want to unpack that.
Uh-oh. Yeah, there's a project I'm working on that is not art. It's a writing project. And I decided to do a color code about that. And I'm still working on it. And it's given me insights, about my process and what I need to work through, limiting beliefs about doing something I've never done before. And it's making me hyper aware of certain, I'd say, shadow aspects of that, the limiting beliefs. And once you're aware of something, like awareness is the currency of change. So once the money's laid out on the table, you know what, you can spend it a little bit more wisely,
You guys say such wonderful little
I love that.
like sound bites, right? Yeah, you always give me great sound bites. So I'm gonna push you gently on this, Joe.
Yeah.
So how? So this is different, right? You're not with a person, you're with yourself. And this is key for me because my goal is to help the listener to do this with themselves. How do they get through life and go to their higher self? So how did you do this? How did you tap into yourself on this project?
Well, I find tapping into myself a lot easier than tapping into other people. But having said that, some people you can just tap into instantly. Like you tap into them even before you have the session. I found that sometimes, like once they set up the call, I'm already tapped into them. And when it comes, because there was one client that I had a vision of like the main theme of the color code. And I was like, interesting, the day before. And then when we did the session, the same imagery was there. And it was the fastest one I did. It was just she was so direct and we were so connected. It was the clearest connection I've ever had. Having said that, myself, it's more about I tap into what my intentions and what I'm trying to do with this project. And I just sit and meditate for a while, and then the main image comes, and then while I'm painting it, all the colors will come and things about it, all these things that I see potential happenings, and to not get caught up in certain avenues that may happen. So to me, it's just about tapping into how I'm feeling about this thing that I'm doing. And then the process just unfolds as if it would another person. And I try not to get, too attached to like, oh, I want it to go this way. So
You know what,
since
Joe? What you just said, you act like it's so easy. You do. You act like it's so easy. And so, well, I set the intention and then I tap into the intention and I feel what I'm feeling, but I don't get too serious and too connected to it. And I'm like, do you know how hard that is for some of us?
Yeah,
Ju-
because not everybody even knows what they're feeling.
inte-
That's part of the problem, is that you don't really know what
yeah,
you're feeling.
or
And
their intention. A lot of people don't even know their intention, right?
well, maybe.
yeah,
I
maybe. A lot of people have their intention. Basically, a lot of people just want money and success being money. So that clouds actually what they truly want underneath is underneath there, is what I found. It's not that the money and success is what they want. They just want what it makes them feel. And they overlay all this egoic stuff. Oh, if I have this better job, this wife, this person in my life, that's really not what's underneath there. What's underneath there is other stuff. At least that's what
So,
I found.
Yeah.
so with yourself, okay, let's role play here, and with me, and then you walk me through this. Okay, so however people voted or responded to the last election, I had a strong feeling or desire for a different outcome. Now, my intention was for a different outcome, but I want to get to the truth of it. Like, what does this mean for me? How do I move on from here? How do I move on from here? Now, how would I do that? How would I listen to the guidance within me?
You want to
I'm
take
not,
this one?
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not so sure like those things are like connected. Okay. Because let's just look at the big picture of this.
Mhm.
You don't have any control over anything anybody does outside of yourself, including whoever's president, vice
Right.
president, congressman. You have no control over that. And so I'd first start out by saying that that shouldn't be like affecting you at all. You have no control over it. That's something you just have to let go of. You have to let go of that. The only control you had was placing that vote. From that moment forward, your job was done. You had nothing else to do with this. Unless you're willing to get involved in politics and go run for president yourself, there's nothing more you can do. And so you just move on from that. It's not about connecting to some place in yourself. It's about letting go. It's about just being. Just be. Just be who you were before. Be that after. This election shouldn't be changing anything about you. Does that
Well,
make sense? Am I
it does.
hitting
It
it?
does. But I'm going to share. I'm going to share something within me. Um, being a gay man and hearing the languaging that was used against the gay community,
Mhm.
it triggers fears in me, like deep fears, and
Sure.
fears of persecution, fears of losing what I have. So I think, oh, how do I react to this? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And
but
part of
still,
me is
again,
like,
you
yeah,
don't want to react. That's the thing. Is like this whole thing about awakening and becoming more spiritual is about not having the reactions. It's about responding. How do I respond to this? Not how do I react? Because people overreact, right? But when
mhm.
you come from a space of response, how do I respond to this? How do I feel like I have, if you're dealing with fear, and I totally believe that there's a lot of people like that right now who
Oh
are
yeah,
afraid. But and I'll relate this to the whole women's issue thing, right?
okay.
Because we have the same like thing, but I can't be afraid. I can't be afraid. There's nothing happening right now. I look around myself, I see there's absolutely nothing going on here. I'm perfectly safe. I can continue to live the way I've been living. Nothing is different. Nothing's different. And so you can release the fear, and releasing the fear is the big part, because fear, when you put your attention on fear, you're adding fuel to the fire. If everyone who was afraid about something like that would take their attention and put the tension on the result that they would like to see, like more rights, more openness, and in other words, be for something, not against it. And then you have power. But falling into that state of fear and allowing yourself to stay there means that you're giving fuel to that. And I don't want to direct my energy toward the idea that we could be taking steps backwards in our country. There may be sometimes a step backwards before we plow forward again, but we're on trajectory for more freedom, right? I totally believe that. And maybe it might be slightly longer road, but it's still going to happen. And I totally believe that. So where do your beliefs lie in that? Do you believe that bad things are going to happen? And if you dwell in that, I might as well be giving them all of my power.
Okay, so I want to go back to what I said. I felt the fear, but I wanted to know how to respond to it. Maybe you heard react, and maybe I said react, but just what is mine to do? What is mine to do now is what I was asking. Go ahead, Joe.
I would say the first thing, because this is what I've had to do in the election, is, and just in general, seeing all the stuff happening, I think about shadow work. And I know you know much about shadow work and doing stuff. You have to go in the muck. And I truly believe, Tonya said maybe this will be a slower way, but I would say a reframe is, it may be the fastest way possible, is what I think it is because it's bringing the deep shadow in this country and in so many people to come to the surface. And it's going to be chaotic for a while. This is how I'm seeing it. It's going to be chaotic for a while, but it is moving us quicker. And if you're going to go through it quicker, you're going to be kicking up some mud on the bottom of the pond. And a lot of it is going to be, and it's going to be a little crazy and whatnot. So with that reframe, the best thing you can do is be centered in yourself and keep responding from the sense of like the outcome that, for what I see. Of course, there's some things happening that I personally do not like, but knowing that, you have to go into the deep darkness of yourself and play in the mud to, really feel it. I think it's probably the quickest way, and this had to happen, because if it went the other way, it would take a lot longer. I just don't see how it could be as fast. I think we're on the fast track, though it doesn't feel that way.
I believe we're on the fast track too, but it may very well seem like it's a slower road. And I totally agree with the going into your, do your shadow work. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of people get stuck there. I've had a lot of clients, in other words, who do get stuck there. They're like, oh, I have to do all this work. I have to do this work. I have to do that. When something, they'll, turn around another corner and, oh, now I have to work on this. And it's always about having to work on themselves. I'm telling you, there's got to be a time in your life where you decide, I'm done. I've done the work. I am healed. I can move forward. I am a better person. This is my 2.0, 3.0 version of myself. And I will no longer be dealing with these issues. They are part of the past. And so when it comes to the fear aspect, like if it's deep down in you, yeah, you need to look at that. But how long are you going to look at it before you decide, okay, I've looked at it, I'm done, I'm moving on? I mean, that's the point we're coming to. Like now, this is now, right now, we have to decide, have we had enough of this?
Okay, so I'm going to bring it back because I agree with everything you're all saying. And, my job is to represent all the people out there, because I have had people calling me all week, and I call it, got them off the ledge by being that positive force. So what I'm trying and hoping to find is learning to listen to the voice within. And so when you say, okay, how do I move on from here? If you want to ask that open-ended question, is that something that do you think it's similar to what you're doing when you do these art readings? Are you reaching into the subconscious? Are you reaching to the one mind and asking for guidance?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So on one hand, I meditate every day, every morning, and I ask, what do you got for me today? What what is important for me to focus on? What do I need to, what have I got to look at or do or whatever? And I just open myself up to it. And as soon as I get the first impulse, I act on that impulse. I'm done meditating. I act on that impulse. And
Okay, I'm going to stop. Can I stop you? How does that impulse come to you? How do you see a picture? Do you hear a word? Do you just feel it?
Yes, all of those things. Like it's never just one thing. And for some people it might be, because not everybody is like really visual the way I am, where I close my eyes, I'm seeing all kinds of stuff all the time. So some people close their eyes, they can't see, they can't even picture an apple. They can't tell you, they can't describe an apple to you because they can't see it in their own mind. So everybody is different. And I feel things. Sometimes I can feel things in my body. I can feel the energetics of things. I can hear things, so sometimes it's like something like a conversation. There's a conversation going on in my head. And I think most people probably have that. Like there's a conversation going on in your mind all the time. Whether you're paying attention to it or not, I guess, is where we're drawing the line. Okay. So if you start paying attention to the thoughts that you're having, then you'll recognize, oh, I'm causing these thoughts. And then beyond that, like, there's thoughts that are dropping in. So it's like, oh, I didn't dream that up. I didn't think that. That was given to me. And so now you're distinguishing between that lower mind and higher mind. It's like, oh, okay, there is a distinction. It kind of still sounds like me most of the time in my own head. The voice kind of sounds the same, but there's a distinction between what I know, it's just repeating thoughts in my mind, and something that has been dropped in and gifted to me. And you kind of get a sense, like, here's the thing. A lot of people think that's something to be afraid of. And, like channeling is a bad thing, or, but what I'm trying to get the point across here is that it's you. It's your mind. It's just your higher mind. It's your God self. And the distinction, is that it's always a good thought. It's not, there's no harm in anything. Like people are like, oh, well, you could be possessed by something or whatever, but it's not like that. This is, because it's all for the benefit of yourself and others. That's the biggest distinction, is that it's a hey, it's simple, like, hey, don't reach that far while you're on the ladder, you know better. Little interjection, only it won't be in the words that you would normally choose. It'd be in slightly different words. Saying the same thing. It's like, hey, you're on the cusp of something here, so be careful. Or just all of a sudden, you normally drive to work going this way, and today you get this sense about you that you want to go this way. And if you follow that, it leads you to things that you couldn't dream up yourself. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I could have never dreamed up that I would be doing what I'm doing right now. There's no way. This was gifted. It's an honor to do these portraits and do this work with people. I think I went around the tree a couple of times on that one, but
no, you didn't.
Love it.
Joseph or Joe, how do you?
No, I was just saying I love it. I kept on thinking about when you said possession, like this isn't a possession. It just made me think about what is possession, and isn't possession just a bunch of thoughts? Because if you're possessed by somebody, it's your thoughts and beliefs. And I thought, well, so many people are possessed with belief systems, whether it's political, whether it's religious, whether it's about themselves, about others. We're all possessed with something. And I think people confuse that with being possessed by something, like a demon or something. And I just found that very interesting when you said possess, because
Yeah, because that's what you hear a lot. Like people are
Yeah.
afraid because they're thinking that maybe this information that you're giving to them is coming from some evil, dark place or whatever. But it's not. It's coming from the highest place. It's coming from divine intelligence, and you know it when you're getting it. You know the difference between other thoughts and these thoughts, and it's about distinguishing the difference. And so, just real quick, every thought that you think is projected out from you into your energy field, and it's in the form of shape and color. And you know how we say, well, oh yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down. Gotcha.
Mhm. Yeah.
So literally we're leaving a trail of our thoughts behind us, and other people can be picking up on that. So and it's not just good thoughts, it's bad thoughts too. So I'll tell you a little story. There was a woman who was perfectly fine crossing the bridge. It was a big bridge over a river, and then she got to the point where she was feeling very angst going over the river on the bridge, and she didn't know why. And she traveled this way to work every day. And so eventually she got to where she was feeling so bad about it that she couldn't drive across the bridge. She had to have somebody else drive her. And then it got worse, where she was like crouching down towards the floor of the car because she just couldn't handle it. And what she was picking up was, that's like the empathy, right? You're picking up the thought forms that were left there, and that there were several people who had jumped off that bridge and killed themselves, and there were people who had crashed their cars on the bridge. And so all of this, these thought patterns have been laying there on the bridge. And just at one point where she was feeling a little low, because this is a lower vibrational thing, if you're a lower vibration, you're more likely to pick up on lower vibrational thought patterns. And so, there's a lot to this that we could unpack, but just so you know that it's not just your thoughts. It's the every thought that's ever thought is still exists. So um sometimes when we're feeling down, like if you have a day where you wake up and you're not feeling that great, and then you go out in the world and it's just gets worse, sometimes it's not just you. Sometimes you're picking up on those thoughts that were left behind by others.
I love it. So you can gently push yourself into a different direction, ideally, by your own thoughts.
Or by not thinking. I mean,
That's even better.
let's just say, okay, so I'm sitting here and I'm thinking over and over again about how terrible I am. I'm not a very good person. I hate myself. I think I'll go eat worms or whatever. If I allow myself to continue thinking that, then the universe brings me reasons to continue thinking that. Like, oh, you don't think you're very good? Okay, here's something that'll prove to you that you're not very good. The universe doesn't know one way or the other. It's just like, oh, that's what you want. Okay, we'll give you more of that. It's so, in other words, you can't just stop from drawing that to you in an instant. It's like a fast moving train, right? And so you have to slow the train down, and then you have to get to a place where you can turn it around, put it on a different track, and go down a new path. And sometimes that takes a little time to figure out how to, you know train your mind. And basically that's what we're doing. We're training our mind to think differently. And so, you know I remember catching a thought and thinking, wow, where did that come from? I can't believe I just thought that. And so I literally backtrack, like, oh, I thought that before that, and this before that, and this before that. And I backtracked those thoughts until I got to something that was like, talk about shadow. I'm like, where did that come from? I can't believe that was even in my mind. And it was a discovery, like, wow, there's hidden stuff in here. Just pay attention to what you're thinking. And that's one way of doing it, by backtracking, figuring out where the thought came from. And then when you hit that core thought, that core belief, you have to ask yourself, well, is that really true? that can't possibly be true because I have evidence in my life that that's not true. And then you can start tweaking your thoughts to something better and better. And eventually you get good at it and you start raising your frequency and your vibration. And the more you do that, the better you get at it. And you don't need to go to a psychiatrist to do this. It's probably easier just to do it on your own. And then, find the quiet space. Like, how many people in the world are really like sitting and taking the moment to just be in the moment? Like, what do you think meditation is? It's just about being present, just seeing the present in the moment, enjoying the space of nothingness. Like, you don't attach yourself to anything. You just look around and, a lot of people close their eyes, but you don't have to close your eyes to meditate. Meditation is about finding the quiet space where you're not thinking about how terrible you are or how bad your job is or how you don't like your wife or your husband. It's eliminating those thoughts for a moment and just put your attention on a thing. One thing is really what it comes down to, because your mind was designed to think. So to completely stop thinking is almost impossible. It's not impossible, but it's almost impossible. So you just put your attention on a thing, one thing. And, I sit at a chair in front of sliding glass doors and I look out and I find something. Sometimes it's the clouds, sometimes it's the sun, sometimes it's a tree or a bird. And I just put all of my attention on that. And all the other thoughts disappear. And then there's a space, there's a gap in there. And that's what you're really looking for, is the gap between thoughts. So I may be having a thought about the bird, like, oh, isn't that beautiful? And just be in the moment with the feeling the beauty. So you're out of your thinking mind into the feelings and you're like, oh, that's so beautiful. And you're just feeling the beauty of it. And then there's a gap that opens up. And inside the gap is no thought. And that's where God enters.
Okay, we're going to repeat that. I want you to repeat that because that was wonderful. So you quiet the mind and open up a gap until you respond with a feeling. Is that what you said?
No.
A feeling space? Go ahead, say that again.
So you're focusing your attention on a one thought. That's why when we, teach people to meditate, we're saying, close your eyes, put your attention on your breath, feel the breath in and out, right? Because you have one thought. That's one thought. You're not thinking about anything else because you can't. When you put your attention on a thing, one thing, that's the only thing you're going to think about. And so you hold your attention on that one thing. And then you feel it, right? So I'm putting my attention on the breathing, and then I'm feeling the breath. Now I'm out of thought. So when you hit the high of the breath, right? You breathe in and you hold your breath just for a second. That's the gap. There's a gap in there. And that's when that divine intelligence can step in and give you the guidance, tell you what to do next. And sometimes, people are looking for these great, big, huge aha moments. And there are some of those, but typically it's a more simple thing. It's subtler. It's like, you need to do your laundry. And right? Or go do dishes.
I love the way you explained that and about that, the process. So, Joe, how did that strike you? Is there anything you want to add to that?
It's almost exact. It's funny. It's almost like the exact thing I would have said is that, because I always pay attention to the gaps between my thoughts. And I use various techniques that you actually mentioned. Being a longtime meditator, I've done so many meditations along the way. And the breath, yes, definitely. And sometimes when I have an active mind, I do a noting meditation, which helped me quite a bit in the past, which is basically, I just note where my attention fully is. And I break it down to a few things: thinking, seeing, hearing, and feeling. And I just note that, what I'm most paying attention to, whether eyes are open or closed. And then over the time, short period of time, there's this realization that comes in, like your mind's just doing that when my mind is overactive. And then it's like, well, wait a minute, I'm very present when I'm doing this because I'm paying attention to where my attention is.
Mhm.
And it's the same way to get there. And I would encourage people to find a way that works for you. And if it stops working for you, try something else. Because I think too many people in the spiritual community stick with one technique and then they plateau somewhere and they don't go somewhere else, try something new. So I'd really suggest people to always try something new if something stops working for you. Because our brains are very complex and we are very complex, and one size does not fit all. But what she
Yeah.
said is, I agree with it 100%.
It's the kind of thing where I'm like, I can't wait to write the notes for this. So, because I'm a big seeker of knowledge, and to write that out and to just fully absorb it, I would encourage the listeners to do that, to absorb that process. It seems very simple, but it's not, and it takes practice, and it gets better and better. Um,
Mhm.
and we all have come to it from different places, you know. Um, I call it praying without ceasing. So that presence that you're talking about, Tanya, for me, that's praying without ceasing. And throughout the day, I stop and I notice the beauty. I focus on something. I focus on the presence and the beauty of that moment.
Mhm.
And so there's just so many different ways of languaging it and of being it, but it is similar. There's a similar process there. And so I think that's why I wanted to do this podcast, is to really, I don't think there's so many people not even aware of this. Like you said, Tanya, they don't even pay attention to what they're thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think everybody does this on some level, like I'm sure everybody could relate to the idea of like driving down the road and then suddenly you're like, wait a minute, where am I? Your attention went somewhere else, right? And sometimes that somewhere else is better. Maybe it's always better. I don't know.
Well,
But
it probably is. It is always better because it's the spiritual realm. But what happens is, I think you're right when you said earlier, and I want to say this because every time I post a video, invariably I will get one person that will post underneath there, "You're in leagues with Satan." That just,
right.
it's like, oh my gosh. And I worry that so many people have been trained not to trust that inner voice, and that it's
Oh,
Satan, or it's,
certainly.
yes.
So then don't even go that far. But if you're not willing to look at the thoughts that you're thinking, and willing to make a choice, is this belief actually working for me? Is and you have to go with like what feels better. And because what feels better is like generally closer to the truth, right? So if it doesn't make me feel good to think that nobody likes me, for instance, then you have to change that belief, right? You have to change that thought. And you could say, well, clearly that's not true because my neighbor likes me, my mom likes me, my dog likes me. I have evidence in the world that says that someone likes me. So I can no longer say to myself, nobody likes me, because that is not true. And I can like state that to the mind, right? The mind goes, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. That's not true. Okay, well, we won't think that anymore. Some people like us. And that's a better feeling thought, right?
Go with the
Now I've
feeling.
moved closer to the truth. And the truth is, the bottom line is that you are love. You are that.
And that voice in you is love. And I agree. I agree. Lovely, lovely. And you know what's so interesting about this conversation, if you look back, both of you have said this about getting out of the mind, standing and watching the mind. You're not your mind. You're not that little voice going, da, 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 oh my gosh, I'm going to be persecuted or whatever. All the imagined egocentric beliefs you apply to whatever you encounter, and just step back into that quiet space. And go in. And I think this is interesting too, is into a feeling space. Huh. A feeling space.
Absolutely.
Huh.
Into the nothingness, I would say, more than the feelings, because feelings are a result of a thought. You're going to have a thought that brings up a
A
feeling.
feeling.
And feelings actually have a lower vibration than thought. And thought is a lower vibration than actually your subconscious mind, which was put in place. Basically, your belief system was put in place to help you exist in this physical realm. So we can't look at it like an enemy, like a lot of people try to make the ego the enemy. It's not the enemy. It's just your friend. And sometimes we have to
tool.
put our friends in their place.
I like to say it's a tool. It's a tool, and it can serve you, but it could, sometimes you have to put the tool down.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Is there anything else, Joe, that you'd like to add to that? Because we're getting on to an
Said
hour
something
here.
about truth, because I know a lot of people search for the truth, what they deem as the truth. And what I found the best way for me personally is to not ask what the truth is. It is to ask, is this useful? Is believing this, whatever it is this useful? Because you can go down a rabbit hole forever about the truth. And then what is that? That's the mind trying to wrap itself around something. So for me, it's all about, is this useful? And usually what's useful is absolutely love and positivity and connection, and we are all one. That's useful. Division, is that useful? These are things people have to ask themselves, is this useful? Is me believing this person has a demon in them useful? Is it useful for me to call this person the devil? Is it useful for me to believe this stuff? Is it useful for me to eat a box of Cheerios? I don't know, that each person has to answer that.
Yes, damn it.
Yeah, because truth is a funny thing, because we put so many layers on it. It's kind of like forgiveness in a way. So, you could be walking down the street and somebody bumps into you and you immediately forgive them. But when it's some bigger thing, you have a harder time forgiving. So it's kind of, the word has multiple layers or dimensions to it. But and so we each are walking around with our own truth, right? Because whatever you believe is true for you. The question is, do you like it?
Yeah, and is it
Right.
serving you?
Yep.
Is it serving
Is
you?
it
Is it
causing you
useful?
pain to believe these thoughts?
Exactly.
Ooh.
And that's the whole thing about people talk about reclaiming their power, is when you're triggered by something, you're giving your power away. Are you going to go back inside and reframe it and change your beliefs? That's reclaiming your power. Not like, oh, I'm going to react to this person and stick them with a sword or whatever.
Exactly.
You're
Yeah.
going to reclaim your power back. And that's what everybody's being faced with right now. Are you going to reclaim your power?
Yeah, your personal power. And where does that lie? It lies basically in the way you think and the way you respond to the world.
Doing that word. I know you like that word, respond, overreact. I think
it's a huge shift in
yeah.
thought process from responding and reacting and overreacting to people. You can't continue to live your life that way and feel good and happy and joyful at the same time. They just don't go hand in hand. So, you have to take a step back, like literally you take a step back, like stand behind yourself and observe what you are doing in the world. And then ask yourself, do I like this? Does this make me feel good? Would I like something better? If you're lacking joy and loving relationships and work that you enjoy, it's because you're doing that to yourself. You're hurting yourself. So you have the power to change that. And that's about the personal power. Take your personal power back. Pay attention to what you're thinking. Ask yourself, is this even true? We're making up stories, okay? All of us are making up stories in our own minds about who we are, who they are, what they just did. We're making up stories. And my question is always, do you like that story? Do you like retelling that story, reliving that story? Or would you like to rewrite a new story? And then I offer, like, try some forward journaling. If you haven't heard of that, like, write down a better story, like write out how you want this day to unfold in a way that is different than the rest of your life, and rewrite your own story. Because if it's all happening up here in your own mind anyway, why not make it better?
I have never heard that term, forward storying. Is that what you said?
Forward journaling.
Journaling. I love it.
Yeah, that's just something I made up because that's how that's
it
and that's
works.
one of the things I teach. Like, I teach a class in that, like, forward journaling. Let's sit down and rewrite our stories, and let's write a story. The next chapter is going to be different than the whole rest of our lives.
You know, I
It's
knew if I brought you two in a room and just like spun you both as tops, that all these wonderful little pieces of information would be flying about. And they are. They are. You both have said such wonderful things. You know, it's amazing. You know, you're both definitely tapped into source, and you're just inspired with the words that come out of your mouth. It's just, this is just great. You know, forward journaling. I'm going to use that now, Tonya.
I might have to go get a trademark on that.
You better trademark it. You don't own anything. I know. We just don't own anything, do we? But yeah. So we're at about an hour, and I try to keep these within an hour. Is there anything else either of you'd want to share that did Tonya just inspire you to say something, Joe? I don't want to stop that top from spinning.
Oh, I thought it was all beautiful.
Yeah.
The only thing I have to say to people is look within yourself, because I know some people will take this stuff and they'll go start to research outside themselves. And, you know, I don't want to say don't do that. Just be aware that you're doing it, because this culture, especially now with phones and media, it's at a rapid rate that people just consume so many images, so much stuff out there, so much news, and I just suggest go within yourself. Don't have somebody else tell you what is right or wrong. Go within, and does it serve you? Does this feel right? A lot of the things that's been said here, you know, do you like that story? Do you like the way it make you feel? You don't? Well, then we have some work to do, don't we?
Yes, exactly. And your answers are always inside of you. So I love that little bit of advice. Other people have their own ways, but it's because they went inside and did their own work and discovered more about themselves, and basically peeled away those things that they realize, I'm not that. I'm not the person nobody likes, I think is what I said earlier. I'm not that person. I'm not the person who, whatever thing about you that you don't want to claim as yours, just peel it off of you, just throw it away.
Yeah.
Get to the core, which is inside, right? So we're just peeling away. People think they have to go out and find themselves. This is the difference, okay? They have to go out and discover who they are and who they're going to be and all that. But it's not that. It's the other way around. It's like, go into yourself, discover who you are already. You are already everything that you need to be. So just peel away the things that you're not. Go within. I love that. Thanks for bringing that up, Joe.
Real quick, that reminds me of meditation about so many people, because I've done this a lot in the past. They're trying to go somewhere. I'm going to find this peace. I'm going to find it. And when you're doing that, you're not being right present with what's happening right now. If you want the fastest way there, be present with what's happening right now. If you're feeling shitty, feel shitty, but really feel it. Be right there. Don't run.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah. That's good.
Hey guys, I want to have a little bell. And every time you say one of these, I'm like, ding, ding, there's another wonderful sentence. That is beautiful. It is about being present. It is about watching yourself lightly. And I was going to go back to something you said, Tonya. I am a member of called the Church of One Love, and I'm a prayer partner. And what we do is sometimes you have trouble seeing the truth of who you are. And so I would like to add that sometimes you need someone with higher guidance to sit there and remind you that, like you just said, I'm not a loser, or whatever belief system might be operating. Sometimes you just need someone. And I always have people call me, and I sit there and I hold the truth of who you are. You are a strong individual. You're flexible. And sometimes you do need someone else to help you. And I've tried to live my life. Yes, go within, but also recognize that we're all connected, and that there's people like you guys out there. There's people that you can contact. There's prayer partners, and there's that will help hold the truth of who you are.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't say that I made it this far without having some help along the way.
Yeah.
And just like I mentioned earlier about having that friend that's willing to point out your shit.
Exactly.
And I do have to point out one thing. Those people that you mentioned that are going to help, like we all have gone for help, it's that inner thing inside you that pushed you, maybe push is the wrong word, but guided you to seek that help.
Yeah.
And trust it. Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Wow. I'm just thrilled. I can't wait to listen to this again and again. I thank you for being on the show, both of you. This
Been
has
a
been
pleasure.
great. And I hope you enjoyed meeting each other too, because you're both.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
That's great. So I would like to tell the listeners, yes, follow this channel. Go up there and like this, and in the notes in the comments section, write how this inspired you. What was your favorite part that Joe and Tonya said? What resonated with your inner voice? Write it in the comments section so we can respond to it. I know that Tonya checks when people write something, and she responds, and Joe will as well. And we are a community, and there is a lot of people out here that share these same ideas, and so it's so exciting.
Mhm.
So all right, well, thank you all for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.